Well, good morning, everybody. To get us going today, I want to show you a tool that I use quite frequently, and I was asked about in the comments last week on how to use. So let's just play around with NOAA's Hysplit model. I think it's going to be very informative on where this forecast is going. So I'll put the link to this website in the comments below, but let me show you how I use it. So first, when I get here, what I do is I come over to the type of trajectory and I choose ensemble. That's the first thing I do. And then I am also only choosing one station when I do this analysis. So I'll click next. And what it'll do is it'll give me an option next to choose the model that I want to run. Now I went already and pre-selected the GFS because I like to see out there pretty far. So I'm going to use the GFS 240-hour forecast. Today I am in Jacksonville, Florida, and so I'm just going to pick Jacksonville, Florida. I'm down here for a conference, and I'm just going to click on that just to give me a location or somewhere nearby. And then at the bottom, you'll see that it puts in the latitude and longitude, and click Next. From here, I'm going to use the 0Z run. I'll have the option to use the 6Z, which was just finishing right about the time I was recording this, but I'm going to go back to the 0Z as my model to be selected and click Next. Now this is where you'll get to quite a bit of options here, but we can keep this pretty simple. You can choose a forward trajectory, which means it's going to calculate over the next 10 days what is expected to happen, or you can choose a backward. I'm going to choose a backward. I'd like to see with the air that's over us this morning, which to be honest is absolutely disgusting outside in terms of humidity. So I just want to know where it came from. So it's already pre-populated the day and time. The total runtime, I'm going to go back 10 hours. That's what this is going to do. Here's my latitude and longitude. And then down here at the bottom, I'm just going to choose the air where it came from at 500 meters above ground level. That's what I can do. You can change this to whatever you want. Put it way up in the jet stream or leave it way down here closer to the surface. So given all of that, I'm going to leave every other category the same. This is a lot about the display and plotting options, which I generally like what they do. I'm going to go ahead and click request a trajectory. Now, it usually takes about 10 seconds to put this all together, and as it's working on it, I'm just going to tell you what I got coming in this video. We are going to look at the hurricane season. We're going to talk about the very wet weather from Texas all the way into the southeast, the return of storms in the northwest. We're going to talk about wildfires that are out of Canada and the western United States. We're then going to look out longer term at the heat that's spreading into the midsection of the country. And at the end, I'm going to review some of the longer range forecasts from the CPC. Okay, looks like my daughter just got her AirPods out, so let's close that. And let's now go here and take a look at this. So if you're curious where the flow came from, this is very instructive, to be honest with you. As you can just see, for the last 10 days, we've watched this flow following the black lines come into the southeast right around the Bermuda High. And we have been talking a lot about how the Bermuda High is moving and kind of opening up closer and closer to the east coast of the United States with time. And this is what has brought in extremely humid air into the southeast, and it's going to continually run into a trigger right in through here. There's a stalled out frontal boundary in this area that's going to make for more and more storms. It looks something like this. This is the flow today. We're just kind of getting an idea, not just today, but the past weekend it's looked like this, just a large ridge of high pressure. And what I've got color shaded here is total precipitable water. So this is just showing you the humidity in the atmosphere getting pulled into parts of the southeast. And that's just one component of our flow, but it's going to be an important one as we think about how this is going to set up going forward. So over the last 7 days, you can tell the heavy rains we've seen across parts of the southeast already from that flow. And we have concerns about the kind of how long will the Bermuda High remain where it currently is, because it will eventually be driving tropical systems into the southeast when we finally take the lid off the atmosphere and clear out some of the Saharan dust. Now, over the last week, a lot of large convective storms that have rolled into the western plains and high plains of like Colorado, getting into Kansas, the panhandles, and also parts of New Mexico. We saw isolated storms, but locally heavy rain and some hail, a lot of lightning rolling around the Big Four Corners Ridge, which has been a mainstay of our discussion now for at least 2 weeks. We saw isolated storms popping up in the very, very dense upper atmosphere smoke that's been over parts of the upper Midwest. That's been complements of the Canadian wildfires. And again, this is actually capturing the derecho event that was just a week ago, right in through this area. The Northeast has seen decent storm activity, but there are a lot of holes in this that we have to continue to observe and understand as we go forward. And we'll take a closer look at the recent precip stats in a few moments. I want to show you yesterday's satellite imagery, though. I love to do this in every video, but I find it just instructive on understanding where we're going to start any new day. And again, can you see the flow coming around? Look at this. Look at the way the tops of these are sheared off. Now that's upper level flow, but there's been some very deep convection over parts of the southeast. Pockets of storms in the Midwest, upper Midwest. Heavier rains coming from some of the bigger storms in Texas, the Southwest. But the wildfire smoke has just been very widespread throughout the western United States, specifically the Northwest, and then coming into the northern plains out of the Canadian Prairie. If you take a look at what's going on in the Canadian Prairie, this is yesterday. So you've got, let me rephrase that. This is north of the Canadian Prairie, I'm sorry. This is up here in the boreal forest. But what you've got here is just several large fires that continue to erupt, and we're not moving the smoke out too quickly. So you can just see as the sun is trying to set yesterday where it is. I did find it interesting to note, look at the, you can see right in through here. Watch some of these little pockets of convection go. See that? And watch how quickly the top is blown off of it. So there's a lot of low-level smoke while there's stronger upper-level winds. I think that's an interesting play on the wind shear profile of this part of North America. But that's a lot of smoke that's in the upper atmosphere here that we're continuing to deal with. And so forecasting out over the next 48 hours where that smoke is going to go, we're having contributions, of course, from the western U.S. wildfires, where we're continuing to watch Oregon and Washington for large fires. If you paid attention to them over the weekend, some of the wildfire smoke was quite intense. But what's spreading across the midsection of the country is mainly coming from northern Canada. Now, unlike last year, where wildfire smoke in spring and early summer was one of the reasons why I think we could keep temperatures down, as we get out into this forecast, we're going to push some of this pretty significant heat that's in the west into the central U.S., and I'm not so sure the wildfire smoke is going to have the same effect as it did a year ago. Just something for us to keep an eye on. From there, I do want to show you one other thing that's impacting air quality. And just as the sun was rising this morning, you can see some of it. This is all Saharan dust. And you notice that there's no real tropical activity, no strong African easterly waves to be monitoring. There's a few in through here, but they're not able to really take off for a couple of reasons. The first being there's quite a bit of dry, dusty air in this location. In fact, if we go back, this is last night. There we go. This is yesterday. You can see just how widespread that dust was. The newest forecasts from NASA's GEOS model is again showing that dust continuing to roll across the open Atlantic Ocean, pushed along, on the southern side of the Bermuda High. And its optical thickness here is very high as it gets pulled into the Caribbean. Watch this plume here, into the Caribbean, eventually into the Gulf of Mexico and wrapped into Texas. We'll have to be on the lookout for Saharan dust in Texas. But the tropical season is a bit on hold right now as the upper atmosphere is kind of suppressing motion, upward motion over Africa and much of the Atlantic. We've been talking about this, right? So until this starts to shift green, that's what we're waiting on. We're going to keep a lid on the upper atmosphere. And a lot of this is due to MJO placement and just the fact that our deepest convection in the West Pacific is primarily located in this area. And what's interesting in here is that we have a tropical system. There it is. And we need to keep an eye on this. Right now it's at tropical storm strength, but we need to keep an eye on where this tropical system is going to go in the very near term. Some of the forecast models continue to pull this moisture right to the north of Taiwan into the east coast of China, and then eventually spread its remnants right here north of the Yangtze River, getting up toward Beijing, the North China Plain, the Manchurian Plain. And what is important about understanding that is that if you look over the next 10 days, I'm going to give you a global perspective on this. This system's coming in right here, and it'll eventually make its way into the North Pacific, which means it'll be a part of the upper level flow we'll need to be discussing. But I show this because of how wet the conditions are going to be. Let's take that drawing up there. There it is. How wet the conditions are going to be across some key growing areas in this part of China. And before I talk about some other places around the world here, I want to just show you that if you look at an NDVI map of where they have crop in this part of China. So remember that the tropical system is going to come in like this, likely at typhoon strength, and leave. It's going to hit, for example, the Shandong province, which lately has been extremely wet. It's going to hit the North China Plain here, the Manchurian Plain, delivering a lot of mid-season rainfall. In some cases, just go back to it again, this is more than 4 inches greater than average, and there's going to be some flooding here as a result. But just since we're here already, let's take a look. The Indian monsoon making a pretty big advance farther to the north. We'd still see drier conditions in parts of western Russia, but Ukraine showing up wetter as we go forward in time. By the end of this week, we'll be talking about the Olympics, of course, getting started. Much of France is a bit drier on average, but there will be storms, it looks like, across the northern part of France, north of Paris. And if you take a look at Australia, this would be desperately needed rains for parts of southwestern, western Australia. This is an area that's been digging itself into deeper and deeper drought with time, so to get some moisture into this area would be key. But outside of that, so much will be, I think, determined in the United States by the positioning, like we talked about last week, the Four Corners Ridge and the Bermuda High. And you can see the Bermuda High really just pumping this moisture in across the south in the coming days here. So let's think about all of this and just add one more bit of context to that rain that's coming from the typhoon. In the last 30 days, we've talked about this flip-flop where parts of southeast China has gone over dry, but north and along the Yangtze it's been quite wet. So this typhoon, if it reaches that strength, will come in right in through here and then put a lot of rain down in and around Beijing and then eventually turn farther to the north. So important just to watch that. And then the other side of this is, here's Ukraine, there's the Russian, kind of Western Russian grain belt, just to illustrate how how very dry things have been here and over the last 30 days. So just wanted to complete that international picture before we come back to the U.S. here. Okay, in the United States, last 30 days, percent of normal precipitation. We can see that where this heavy rain is expected to be coming in could be hitting some very dry areas, which we do need to see kind of filled in with some better moisture here mid-season. But the western United States has been extremely dry. It's also been extremely hot, and we're not anticipating that to change very much. Despite this past weekend, some of the showers that rolled just along the coast here, straight north, hitting parts of, for example, the Willamette Valley, getting up toward the Puget Sound. That was some needed rain, but not enough to offset what has been a very, very dry last 30 days or so. So just pause the video, take a close look at the map if there's other things you want to see here. But what I want to do is I want to figure out kind of where it's going. So pretty early this morning, just a hair before 6 a.m., we're taking a look at air quality alerts out in the western United States. This is a large area of excessive heat watch. We have excessive heat warnings throughout the west, some fog early this morning in parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota. Flood watches down here in New Mexico and also along the parts of the East Coast in Virginia and North Carolina. Okay, this morning's temperatures, though, really have me thinking about where this might be headed. We've got so much humidity in the atmosphere across the south, we couldn't drop the temperatures much below this last night. But in the west, this morning, well before the sun rose, Spokane, 78, Yakima, 75. We can just see Boise, 87. This was incredibly hot early morning temperatures across parts of the western United States. And that's where our ridge is. So you say, what's going on right now? Large ridge opening here. Broader trough leaving a front to the south right there. There's the Bermuda High feeding into this. And as we play this forward, take a look, Monday into Tuesday, there's not a whole lot of change except for this trough that's coming out of the Gulf of Alaska. It's closer to the northwest. And that trough as it sweeps through is going to be important for a couple of things. Later this week, it's going to open up much more heat to the northern plains and Canadian prairie here. And it's also going to just give us a temporary shift in the pattern by Friday getting into Saturday. And what I'm talking about here is that Friday into Saturday, watch the larger ridge open up around the Great Lakes, but we're going to get flow that's coming in like this, which means late this week into the weekend, we need to be paying attention to how much moisture is recovered into the central United States, and does this broader trough bringing in southwest flow initiate a lot of storms in the midsection of the United States. Still think that was there last week. I still think it's there in the forecast for the end of this week as well. Then playing this beyond that into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, the atmosphere kind of flattens out and seems to get back onto a reset. So you say, what's the reset? Well, the wind started to accelerate here again. There's the kind of reemergence of the ridge. And what I want to know is, by the beginning of August, which is here, where does that ridge go? And it seems like the model's been very consistent to open that ridge back up around the Four Corners states. There's the Bermuda High, and the flow goes back to what we've kind of been talking a lot about here at the end of in the month of July. So the farther out I look, the more I see a kind of a reset going back to something that looks like this with time. Now, we'll also be watching about this time frame. This is about 10, 11, 12 days from now, where the remnants of this tropical system, this guy right here, where it eventually makes it. How far into the flow of the upper atmosphere does this influence things, and does it maybe push more heat across the central part of the United States by just, well, reinforcing these troughs? That's what typhoons typically do when they recurve into the northern parts of the Pacific. They tend to reinforce troughing somewhere in this vicinity. So we'll watch out for that very carefully going forward. But as it stands, there is going to be a lot of scattered storms by this afternoon, this evening. And that's 7 o'clock tonight, Central Time. So from, Mexico through Texas, all the way throughout the southeast, getting into the northeast, broad area of scattered showers and storms. They're rolling around the Four Corners states. They're in the upper Midwest. Just a lot of scattered storms. Playing into the overnight hours tonight, into early tomorrow morning. And then playing out there tomorrow afternoon, evening, very similar. All the storms here feeding on the Bermuda High. Frontal boundary slipping through the Great Lakes states back toward Iowa, producing some storms. We're going to watch those in the overnight hours and get all the way out there to midday on Wednesday, where things start to clear out a little bit. There's no major severe threat kind of put out there by the Storm Prediction Center across the country. There will be isolated storms. Some of them can produce straight line winds, and some of them can produce hail, but large organized systems of severe weather, we don't seem to be seeing a reason to kind of make a call for that. So let's get into the models. This is the AIFS, the Artificial Intelligence Forecasting System for the next 7 days. And this is desperately needed. The rain coming into this area where the wildfires are. We have seen the models increase the chances of storms throughout the upper Midwest, but very wet from coastal Texas all the way into the southeast. And again, this rain in some places here isn't just needed, it's desperately needed. To get a different view on it, this is the national blend of models. So now we can see the southwest monsoon, kind of the scattered nature of the storms coming through the Midwest, upper Midwest. There's a drier swath from parts of Texas and Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, into Illinois, but very wet to the south of there, all along our Gulf Coast into the interior and up the East Coast as well. WPC is very similar in its forecast, and so is the 7-day European. I like the consistency in the models as we go forward, and the GFS has bought into this as well. So let's go ahead and have a look at the models side by side. I got the GFS on the left, European on the right, picking this up this afternoon and this evening. Just widely scattered storms across the country in several locations. But as I play it forward, I'm going to do this for you quickly. You're going to just notice a pretty consistent theme here, and that is flow around the Bermuda High. And while there are troughs that sneak across the Canadian prairie and they try to make it around the Great Lakes, like this one we're going to see on Wednesday, all right, bringing in that front, most of the flow is coming out of the Gulf, and it's just hammering this area with wet conditions. Now, there will be time periods when you're outside of that where we get high pressure that sneaks in and we see changes in the direction of the winds, but my goodness, this is overall just dominated by that Bermuda High. So that's what brings me to these probability maps, which I'd love to show you. This is the 10-day outlook for the probability of an inch of total precipitation. And let's get this up to 2 inches. Should have got a new model in. I just did. Yep. So let's go back and take you out 10 days. There's the probability 10 days out for 2 inches. And we go up to 4. Watch the Texas coastline here. Extremely heavy rainfall, but there's a corridor right in through here that we're expecting some very, very heavy rains. And on the drier side of it, who's expected to see, less than a ½ inch, this is where we have the driest air. So it's in the west, it's in the southern Canadian prairie, it's Montana, the high plains. There will be isolated storms in here, but the chances of going over pretty wet are relatively limited. And you can see how some of this extends right through the heart of the Corn Belt into the eastern Great Lakes, since we need to have a discussion about temperatures, which we'll do in a few moments as we finish July and get into the month of August. So real quick though, this is the week 2 forecast. And the things I want to pay attention to here, especially in the European model, in fact, I want to blow up the European solution on this. Out into week 2, as that front comes in, remember the broader trough that comes in, I do want to watch this whole corridor for the risk of strong to severe storms. You can see out here when only looking at days 8 through 14, which is the 29th through the 5th, that a lot of that is coming here with respect to the stronger storms and the flow coming in using the Gulf of Mexico to make these storms. I think if you brought this back a couple days, you'd see more of it in the central United States as well. So that seems to be the way week 2 is going. But during this time period, as we've discussed, we're going to start to share some of that western U.S. heat. And when I say western U.S. heat, take a look at this. This is the month-to-date average temperature ranks. Now, we've been hot up the East Coast. There's no denying this as well. That's all coming around the periphery of that Bermuda high. But in the west, very, very hot conditions. In fact, so far for most of California's Central Valley, all the way through the Willamette Valley, parts of the Columbia Basin, all the way back down to southern Arizona and western Arizona. This is the hottest start to any July. And we're 21 days into it, right? We just started our 22nd day today. And all that heat there has prevented much of the central United States from going over hot. So take a look at what the temperatures are expected to do, though. Here's today's highs. All the heat's in the west, here into parts of Montana where we have the heat watches. There it is. Tuesday's a scorcher here. 103, in the Snake River Valley, all throughout the west, triple-digit heat, while much of the central United States and east is cool. This is Wednesday's high temperatures, 106. Look at that. Going into Thursday, the heat continues to press toward the Dakotas. Now we've got a couple of days in here where we're well into the 90s, trying to crack 100 degrees throughout parts of the Dakotas. So this is the heat opening up the first time. There's Saturday getting into Sunday. Now we're starting to spread some of that out as that broader trough, remember the one that's coming in here, starts to make its influence. The day 5 through 10, according to the GFS, looks something like this in terms of the temperature pattern. But day 10 through 15 it warms back up again for much of the United States and the Canadian prairie. And it's that time frame where the deeper trough is digging into Alaska, hence the colder weather. The stronger flow is here. We're just opening up for broader ridging across much of the rest of North America. European model agrees with this. That's day 5 through 10. And this is day 10 through 15. A lot of heat spreading, except where you've got this action. Okay? All right, that walks us out there. We've looked at the hurricane season, looked at some international things, but we're now trying to assess is where might this be going in the longer term. So tropical season, I still have a feeling that when this wave gets here, August 1st, 2nd, 3rd, we're finally going to take the lid off and get things going. The ocean temperatures are plenty warm in that area, as you can see. So we're just needing to get the dust out and to take the lid off. And it seems as though August is going to be the kind of time period for which that's happened. But as you look at these ocean temperatures, we think of a couple of things. The cooler water here is a part of the Atlantic meridional mode, which we looked at last week, and know that it is very positive right now, and the influence of it will likely be for an August, September, October, helping the activity with the tropical season when it gets going. But the second thing is just to take a look at what the ocean temperatures have been doing along the equatorial Pacific. While we're technically not into La Nina territory, over the last week to 10 days, we've watched the ocean temperatures out in the middle of the Pacific drop. So we're now a couple 0.2 degrees C below average, and we're starting to get more of a La Nina signal. Now, thinking about that, are the trade winds there? Well, one of the ways by which we can assess that is by looking at the Southern Oscillation Index. And if this had just jumped up and was way up here at 7, 8, 9, then I would be, oh yeah, we are full on La Nina, but I still think we're waiting for this La Nina to engage. But if we continue to see more cool water surface and the trade winds begin to increase in more frequent easterly wind bursts, which they've been trying to do, I think we're going to have more of a discussion soon about what this is going to mean for August, September, and October temperature and precip. So tiny map, but let's blow this up so you can see it. What I've got for you here is a correlation with ocean temperatures in Nina region 3.4. That's right out here again, just right in the middle of the equatorial Pacific right there. And what's interesting is in August, we tend to get, when there's more La Nina-like behavior, we tend to get hotter in the central United States. And I know you're going, well, that's blue. I understand. This is a correlation map. And if it was an El Nino, all right, in other words, the ocean temperatures were warm, then yes, this would be cooler than average. But they're not. They're cool along the equator, which means you have to take the inverse. We know that these colors represent cooler than average conditions. What's very tricky in August, regardless of El Nino or La Nina, is to figure out the precipitation pattern. So much of it is created by the tropics and the way things move in the North Pacific. But if you're curious, what you've got here is the correlation with precipitation in August. And so where you see the warmer colors, we tend to be drier. Where you see the cooler colors, it tends to be wetter. But you cannot use this figure accurately and skillfully if you're in this region, just because of the tropics as they get fired up in the month of August. So given all of that, let's take a look at some bigger picture things. This is the new this is the new ECMWF outlook for the month of August. Very little change over what I shared with you last week. It still comes down to the story about the two large high pressure cells flanking North America. And this is its newest precipitation forecast. So this makes sense, right? Wetter into this area, a bit drier into the interior. That's consistent with what we see going on internationally with respect to La Nina, the flow in the North Pacific, and so on. But just don't take this and say it's going to be dry. There will be storms that erupt in this area during the month of August. And week in and week out, the pattern will shift, and we'll pay attention to it and keep you up to speed. But you notice that the European model's forecast is very similar to what the CPC has. Let's get to it there. There's the CPC. That's their 1 month outlook on precip. There it is on temperature. So very consistent, I think, overall with the sign, right? So where it's wetter or drier or warmer or cooler. But their temperature pattern is a bit more anchored on a large western U.S. ridge rather than one that opens more frequently into the central U.S. So to get this finished up, I want to take you back to just something we talked about the other day, and that is going to be the 3-month temperature outlook and precipitation outlook. And if you go to this site again, cpc.ncep.noaa.gov, and click on the word 3-month, you can be taken to their actual model output. And so you can pick your months here and look at the temperature and precip. I'm going to go ahead to August, September, October and look at the precip, and now you'll kind of see why and how they made the graphic they did. So there's their probabilities, looking at the chances here of precipitation being above or below normal. And then you can come back and adjust it. So let's go to September, October, November, and then October, November, December, looking at fall. And then let's go to December, January, February. And you notice that once we get out there, they're really kind of starting to put drier conditions under weaker subtropical jet stream flow here, but a highly variable jet coming into the northwest and exiting. This is very much suggesting that La Nina comes in and takes over pretty quickly here. We can also do the same kind of thing by looking out at the temperature pattern. Well, that's another way to view it if you'd like, but I want to go to this. There we are. That's their early winter outlook for the U.S. But as we talked about, we do expect much of fall to be above average in terms of temperatures for a lot of the United States. This is September, October, November probability of exceedance here, looking at fall temperatures. So we'll just keep this narrative going this week, and we'll watch the moving pieces, especially that system that's moving into China and its influence on our pattern. But you've now seen what I think might be the shifts to expect, and so we'll wrap it up here, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.